Welcome to my Rush OTD Capstone Dissemination presentation titled Supporting Caregivers of Foster Children Through Occupation-Based Education. Here's a brief overview. First, I would like to acknowledge several people that made this project possible who I'm incredibly grateful for all the support. First, Dr. Lauren Little, who is my faculty mentor throughout this process, along with Dr. Paula Costello, who is the doctoral capstone director and has been my advisor throughout my entire grad school journey and helped me navigate many bumps along the road. My site mentor from SOS Children's Villages of Illinois, Vivian Moore, and lastly, Dr. Becky Ozelli, the Rush OTD program director. SOS Children's Village of Illinois is part of a larger organization that provides foster care for children around the world. This organization has an innovative approach to foster care where they have villages around the Chicagoland area. There are 4 villages that consist of many single-family homes within a few blocks radius and a community building in the center. SOS Children's Villages of Illinois employs professional foster parents to live in the homes with the children 24/7. Their main mission is to keep sibling groups together and have increased stability in a population which is typically highly mobile. Foster care is an emerging practice area for occupational therapy practitioners, but we have such a unique perspective that is incredibly beneficial for foster care. Currently within SOS Illinois organization, there is no occupational therapist on the team, nor has there ever been. They have clinical therapists and social workers on staff to provide services for children and families as needed. Occupational therapy has a unique and distinct role in the foster care system that would be able to focus on the occupational participation and outcomes of foster children during a highly sensitive time in their lives. All children within the foster care system have experienced ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. ACEs are traumatic or potentially traumatic experiences that a child incurs before the age of 18. There are 9 types of ACEs: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, mental illness of a household member, alcoholism or drug use of a household member, divorce or separation of a parent, domestic violence towards a parent, and incarceration of a household member. An individual's adverse child experience score is reflective of a cumulative childhood stress due to traumatic or potentially traumatic events occurring during childhood. ACEs affect children's health, well-being, and social development, and then in the future have large effects on their occupational functioning and socioeconomic status as adults. Overall, about 60% of people experience at least one, and about 16% experience more than 4 ACEs in their childhood. People that have experienced ACEs during their childhood are at higher risk of developing other physical and mental health conditions as they age. These conditions can include anxiety, depression, asthma, chronic drinking, smoking, and fair to poor health status. It is these ACEs that are the cause for children to enter the foster care system. Therefore, 100% of foster children have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. The children who have this higher degree of ACEs tend to experience a heightened amount of instability within the foster care system, which creates even more difficulties in their lives. For students that have experienced ACEs, there is a positive correlation between the number of ACEs encountered and academic failure, attendance problem, and behavior issues. These academic issues can cause an individual to be ill-prepared for independence, both financially and personally. I use the person-environment occupational performance model to inform my capstone project. This model looks at occupational outcomes through the interactions of the person, the environment, and the occupational demands. And finally, the performance of that occupation. It assesses supports and barriers that impacted participation, including the intrinsic and extrinsic factors that contribute to a person's lived experience. Part of that lived experience for all foster care youth is the trauma or potential trauma that they have faced. It is vitally important that I use the trauma-informed care approach to build trusting relationships with the foster caregivers and staff, as well as applying knowledge of trauma-informed care into my educational series. And lastly, using the family-centered care approach, because many children in the foster care system have complicated family dynamics, so it's important to take into consideration foster family relationships and how that may differ from biological family relationships. The significance of this project: so there's a need to support the developmental, social, and emotional health as well as the academic resilience and future success for children within the foster care system. Additional education needs to be provided to foster parents who are caregivers of children with ACEs on how to best support the child and what resources that are available to them. Occupational therapy can provide education and coaching to caregivers of foster children through occupation-based education. The two objectives that I had for this capstone experience first was in the advanced practice area of focus. So it was demonstrate competency in designing and delivering occupational therapy interventions and education to caregivers and children. And the second was in the advocacy area of focus, which is advocacy for the role of occupational therapy in a foster care organization and homeless populations. So I created a 4-part module series. This is the first of 4 presentations that were for foster caregivers, and this was given in an online video module format, as well as the additional handouts and infographics. This first presentation in the module series focused on common occupational areas that OTs focus on in the pediatric field specific to children in foster care. This presentation was separated into 3 categories: sensory regulation, behavior, and communication, while addressing various occupational challenges within each of those domains. While completing the needs assessment for this series, parents and clinical therapists identified that behavior was the largest barrier that parents faced on a daily basis. I addressed the ABCs of behavior and identifying the function of a behavior in order to make any behavioral changes. They also expressed little to no knowledge of sensory information and asked for explanation and strategies and to integrate sensory regulation into their daily lives. Lastly was communication, as some behavioral challenges begin as communication difficulties. I included an overview handout of the presentation information, as well as more in-depth handouts for the behavior and sensory strategies to allow for ease of access of information. The second presentation went through the various developmental milestones that an average child would hit and at what ages. The purpose of this presentation was not to make foster parents developmental experts, but rather to know simple signs of when a child is showing signs of a delay so that they can mention it to a pediatrician. In the foster system, foster caregivers receive very little background on a child when they're placed into their home. Therefore, this additional knowledge will empower the foster caregiver to be aware of any developmental delays and begin intervention services when necessary. The third presentation focused on communication skills for relationship building and strategies for post-crisis intervention. This presentation is mainly based in trauma-informed care and addresses how to communicate and de-escalate when a foster child is in crisis. It includes various examples and trauma-informed care strategies for a parent to use with their child. The last presentation in the module series identified the various avenues for receiving OT services. I discussed when and where it is best to reach out for services and what is available to children in foster care. Information in all 4 of these presentations and the handouts were created using health literacy parameters in mind so that the information would be accessible to everyone. The handouts were created for quick reference, and then the caregiver could watch the video for more in-depth information and examples. All module materials were given to SOS Villages Illinois so that they can be accessed, referenced, and used for many years to come, whether that be as part of training for foster parents, continuing education, or for when foster parents are seeking additional information on various topics. The limiting factors included limited communication with foster parents regarding recruitment and needs assessment. I attempted to communicate with foster parents and clinical staff in various avenues, though received little communication in return. So I wasn't able to create a very specific series for them. It was more of a general for the material that was covered. And then there was a lack of feedback on the online module presentation because of this online format. I originally wanted to do in person, in which I would receive additional feedback, but that goes into the future research aspect. I think it would be great to have a study for the knowledge gained during this module series and of the satisfaction perceived by the parents, foster caregivers, or staff that complete this module series. I also think a needs assessment and feasibility studies for the integration of occupational therapy into foster care organizations would be super beneficial to further integrate and continue occupational therapy services being added to foster organizations. The clinical bottom line for occupational therapy is that OT has a very unique and beneficial perspective in the foster care setting, and further integration of OT services into the foster care setting for both children and adults would be very beneficial. What I personally learned throughout this experience is that it's important to ensure to meet the needs of the participants by taking into account the contextual factors of their daily lives. I wanted to do the in-person session, however, that didn't quite fit into what the participants would best benefit from, so I switched to the online module format, which they are able to complete at their own leisure. So here are the references, and I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you watching this presentation and hope you learned a little bit more about occupational therapy in the foster care setting.